Guys, good morning. Hopefully you used yesterday as time to get caught up on finishing your color grid. So you can see here is mine is not completely finished. It's close to finished. And it's on the sketchbook paper. I'm gonna do some like review techniques with watercolor today. And so I'm going to preserve the rest of this inside paper and set that aside. And I'm going to go ahead and keep working on the other sections of this sheet. So instead of keeping it like a book, I'm going to go ahead and pull this sheet out and call this sheet my practice sheet, right? And I am going to go ahead and use just half of it today. This will be a two-part video just so it doesn't get to be too long. And we're gonna review some watercolor techniques. If you have tape at home, you could use tape to tape off squares the way we would in class. It's a quick way for you to get like sections on your sheet. So if you happen to have tape, you can go ahead and use tape to go ahead and like make the sections the way we would in class. We're looking at having, let's see, 8 sections. Maybe let's go bigger. 6. Let's go with 6 sections. If you don't have tape, which probably maybe a lot of you don't have tape, you can just go ahead and use a pencil and divide your sheet into 6 sections. Making sure, so here's my middle. I'm just gonna make sure that when I draw my sections that I leave a little bumper in between them. So this little bumper is going to keep my paint from mixing together as I go, which will be good. Oops. All right, so 6 sections. We are going to start with something called a a flat wash. Sorry. A flat wash. Let's see, I need to find a paintbrush. I'm apparently not very prepared this morning. Paintbrush. And flat wash. I am going to go ahead and I need to be ready to lift my paper. The trick for a flat wash is kind of 2-part. Part 1, it's that you have enough paint. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to use this as a chance to kind of clear off my palette a little bit. So no idea what kind of funky color this is going to be, but we'll deal with it. So you can see, though, that I'm mixing up quite a big section of paint. If you're using, I think I showed you guys, you're going to need, if you're using that kind of circular palette that I sent home for you, you might be able to use like one of those little angled wells. And like, because you can see here, I can turn this and I can pull this up, and that would be kind of like you guys pulling up your paint in that little angled section of the palette. Making sure that you have enough paint in your puddle so that it's not super watery looking. Then what I'm going to do is, the trick for a flat wash is to raise the edge of your paper a little bit so it's not just flat on the table. I'm going to really saturate my paintbrush. And I'm going to go across, and you'll notice that I have this like drip line here of paint. It's like my paint is about to drip. That is what we want when we do a flat wash. If I don't have enough water and paint, I won't have that drip effect. And then that's a sign that I'm not going to be able to make a really good wash that's even. So a very flat wash, even one color, no brush strokes, needs that like little puddle to pull along. Now you'll see that I still have that puddle. I need to get rid of the puddle. So now I'm squeezing my paintbrush dry, and I am gonna just like vacuum up this puddle of paint that's here. So I'm just leaving my paintbrush there. And as soon as I'm not picking up any more paint, I'm going ahead and squeezing my paintbrush dry again. And you can do that on paper towel or tissue, or I just have this, it's like an old washcloth in my studio that I use all the time, so that I'm not wasting papers. So there you go, flat wash. You'll see this like lighter section here where I stopped to talk to you. If it's stripy, usually that happens because you didn't use enough water. Do not try to fix it now. Wait until it dries. So as soon as you go back in when the paint is still wet, it's actually going to just get worse and worse. Letting it dry first and then going back is the key to making a really great flat wash and fixing a flat wash. We are going to practice now a graded wash. And then this one actually will end up being our 2-color graded wash. It's just, we have to let it dry first. So I'm going to use that same color. You guys can switch colors if you want. Doesn't matter. I have this mixed up in a pool, and so I'm just going to use it. Again, I'm going to lift my paper just a little bit. And I'm going to go across. Now I'm going to switch and not add paint anymore. I'm instead just adding water. Wet my paintbrush again and add more water. And I'm going to pull all the way down to the end. Again, I'm going to clean my paintbrush off, and I'm going to squeeze my paintbrush dry. And I'm going to like kind of soak up this extra water and paint. If I don't soak up that extra water and paint that happens out here at this edge, what happens when it dries is it like leaks back into the color, and it'll make something called a bloom. Not a bad effect, it just is an effect I'm going to try to avoid. So that's a graded wash. So it starts light and starts dark and gets lighter. We use this when we make skies in a landscape. I am going to do a second graded wash now. And use a different color. Not sure what color this is. So again, I'm mixing up a nice big pool of paint. And I'm starting at the top, making sure that I have that kind of drip line. Again, I'm holding my paper up, going about 1/3 of the way down, and now I'm going to clean my paintbrush out so that I have no more or less paint, and I'm just going to mix in water. Clean my paintbrush off again. This works best, obviously, if you have clean water. My water's a little grungy, I think. Light all the way down. So, flat wash, graded wash, graded wash. We're going to let this graded wash dry and come back and add a second color so that you can see how to make a 2-color graded wash. So that will be fun. We'll do that in a minute. Let's see. We are going to now play with wet into wet color mixing. If you remember back to painting 1, painting with watercolor is like, that's its most unique property, is that the paint mixes together on its own, just in a puddle of water. And so I'm going to start with some juicy paint in this square. Juicy paint, juicy paint. And I'm going to add some additional paint so that the two colors like kind of bump into each other and just naturally mix together. I am going to add another color now. And you'll see some colors are like pushier than other colors when you do this. Like some colors will really shove other colors out of the way. Sometimes that has to do with pigment density. Sometimes that has to do with the water. So I'm trying to have enough water so that these colors mix together, but not so much water that I end up with this huge puddly edge. So just like before, I'm squeezing my paintbrush dry, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to suck some of this extra paint up. When I see that I'm not sucking up extra paint anymore, I'm going to squeeze my paintbrush dry again, and I'm just going to suck up that extra paint. If you want, you can play around with this a little bit and do sort of a splatter effect. So a little wet into wet splatter. That's kind of fun. So I took my last color and put that on there. And like I said, this is that property, that wet into wet property is unique to watercolor. You have to have kind of puddly water to get your paint to mix that way. And that's sort of one that you have to learn to master a little bit. So that's wet into wet. I'm going to check my two color wash. My middle wash over here is ready. So I'm going to actually tip the paper upside down because it's easier for me to work with it this way. And I'm going to add a second color to this wash. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this magenta-y color I've already got mixed up. Again, I want to make sure that I have enough paint so that I'm not going to run out of paint when I do this. And again, I'm going to lift my paper, and I'm starting at the light end, starting with paint, cleaned my paintbrush out, and now I just have less paint and more water. I can clean my paintbrush out again. And so you can see that that ends up like the two colors fade into each other then. If I'm not super happy with like this stripey effect, I can let it dry and give it another go. So flat wash, graded wash, two color graded wash. This is wet into wet color mixing. Here is, obviously when we work in watercolor, we can work wet like this, which is what I've been doing. But when we go to finish a painting, we tend to use more paint and less water. And that effect is called dry brush. So I have less paint now. I have more control when I have less paint on my paintbrush. When we talk about painting things like a human face or a still life, we also have to be able to shade or make a series or a range of values in paint. And I'm going to teach you a technique that utilizes glazing next week, which is one color over another color to add shadows. But if we review, if we think back to like painting one and doing the monochromatic face, there is a technique that we learned that takes some practice, and maybe it's something that you guys remember but don't really remember how to do. So you can see I just drew a circle on my paper, and I'm putting this big like moon of paint on that circle. Now what I'm doing is cleaning my paintbrush completely off, and I am squeezing it mostly dry. And what I'm going to do now is pull this paint up into the sphere. So now what it feels like I'm doing is like drawing with the paint. It's like I'm shading with a pencil a little bit. When it starts to feel like I'm moving too much dark paint, like now, I need my sphere to get lighter. I'm going to rinse my paintbrush off and squeeze it mostly dry again so that I can like rub at this edge and pull less paint out. Again, clean my paintbrush off, squeeze it dry. I want this to be a gradual shift from dark to light as much as possible. So you can see I started with that dark moon, and I have a whole range of values now. I just cleaned my paintbrush off again. I'm squeezing it dry. And now I'm just pulling at this lightest tone here. And voila, we have a controlled three-dimensional looking sphere. I then can come out here at this bottom edge if I like and make a bit of a shadow color. Probably could make that get a little darker. Or not. And this is a technique that if you haven't had painting in a while, or maybe if you recently had painting but sort of struggled with like the monochromatic portrait, this is a good one to practice quite a bit, just because this is what gives you the control to paint really great objects in watercolor. And it's that dry brush, that idea that I can put paint on my paper, and even though this paint is now mostly dry over here on this stripe, I can take a clean paintbrush and I can tease that paint out. And so it's like I'm putting the paint in a little puddle and then using that paint to make my painting. And it's this technique that helps us learn how to paint things. Objects, things with details. So you can see I just teased out a little bit of paint from that side too to make the rest of my sort of table for my little sphere here. So go ahead and give these a practice. And post your results. If you find that you don't like one, go ahead and practice another time. I've left you an extra section on your sheet. So go ahead and use the sixth one however you like. But give these a go. Like I'd probably redo my double color wash. Maybe wait till it's dry and try again. But practice the flat wash, practice the graded wash, practice the 2-color graded, do a wet into wet, and then practice this moving the paint up into your painting. We'll have some more techniques tomorrow. Have fun. Post me a picture.